On this episode of Locked On Canadiens, the Montreal Canadiens won against the Anaheim Ducks because one team had to.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to episode 1201 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing that supports the show and ensures you don't miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as @MaybeIt'sIan, also known as the guy who hates 3-on-3 overtime. And I'm joined as always by Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick. Laura, are we right about 3-on-3 overtime? Was that not the worst 5 minutes of hockey you've seen in your entire life?
I also want to go on the record as agreeing with you about that 3-on-3 overtime. I texted you guys that it was like a football period type of
Yes.
like an end of a football game. It just would not end. Would not end. And it like you're gaining like a yard, right? Like so
Yeah.
We're
lucky NHL, teams can't call timeout in the middle of play or have three of them because that's what would happen in 3-on-3 overtime.
It would be like 90 minutes long, which we don't want.
No,
and
especially
also,
these 7:30 starts. If it was that long, this would be Wednesday's episode of the show because we'd be asleep.
And that was the thing too, is that it always seems to happen when it's a 7:30 start for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how like the luck with this sort of thing. But
yes,
that is what it is. We'll break down the game for you today on Locked On Canadiens. We're going to talk, of course, about our savior, Patrik Laine, who continues to fill the net both in regulation and now the shootout. And Kirby Dach had quite an interesting game. He showed some signs of life. He regressed very quickly in the third period. So we'll get into all of that on today's episode. But I do also want to remind you, we have a contest going on. I will bend down and pick this up for this lovely signed Carey Price photo. The rules of this are you need to send us an email with a screenshot of your Spotify Wrapped showing that we are in your top 5. That'll enter you. Or you can send us a screenshot of you leaving us a positive review on iTunes or wherever you review your podcasts. Doing that really helps us a lot. So if you want to win this picture, go ahead and enter that way. We're going to go until Christmas and then do the drawing, and we'll make sure that the drawing is done fairly and you guys will know who won. Yes,
and it's lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. We talked about it yesterday, and I forgot to mention the email address. So we got a comment saying, "Where do we send this thing?"
Anywhere. You can, fire it out of a cannon. One of us will find it somewhere. Yeah, no, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. Blue Sky, Locked On Canadiens there. We're Locked On Canadiens just about everywhere now. So you'll be able to find us. All right, let's talk about this game. Montreal gets out to a quick start with a power play goal from Patrik Laine in the same spot he scored both of his other goals from. This one was really interesting because it was into a practically empty net, and Lucas Dostal, who is a fantastic goalie, almost got back in time to get it. And then after that goal, Montreal just decided they were done. And that was kind of it for their effort. Was that concerning to you, the way that they kind of finished out the first period and started the second? It really bled into their second period.
It really did, just because I thought it was a bit early. What I was really hoping for were between period adjustments. Like I was really hoping for a second period for them to come out, full of fire, which did not happen. And we have seen them do this inconsistent thing a lot, but it really did feel like after they let Anaheim back into the game, both teams played badly, but they allowed Anaheim to control almost the entire rest of the game, including the overtime at that point. And Anaheim's not a good team. Like Anaheim, these are two bottom feeding teams, right? Like you said off the top, someone had to win that game, but it didn't have to be that way, right? So like I do know, we want to focus on the positives, and that's coming up later. I just felt that there were some bizarre moments too. Well, why is Caden Gooley fighting? Things like that. But
because he won. That's why he was fighting. He ragdolled Ryan Strome in that fight. Strome got the first right, and that was all he got.
And that's the thing. It's like Gooley shouldn't be fighting, but he won.
Yeah.
And so like there's a lot of Jacob Trouba didn't behead anyone. He did flatten Slavkovsky, but without going for the head, which was also bizarre.
Yeah.
Also so it was a weird game. It was a very Monday night game, as I'm starting to call them. Like it was just a lot of things just didn't really make sense. And what I'm mostly concerned about is, again, the Montreal Canadiens' failure to take control of the game. That's my biggest thing. It's less even about being hemmed in their own zone, which they were a few times. It's less about taking ill-advised penalties, which I know we're going to talk about Dach a little bit later. It's not as much about that as it is about the fact that they just simply cannot take control and maintain control of any stretch of the game, and that's something that I want to see from them.
Yeah. I thought the first couple minutes of the game, they were just they were entirely in control of that game. Anaheim kept taking penalties. Montreal made them pay on that power play. And then it just sort of they coughed the puck up a whole bunch. Justin Barron was there. I'm starting to feel like even he knows that he's running out of racetrack or has already run out of racetrack. Because in reality, like unless you're trying to get Barron into the lineup, there's no reason that you should be putting Barron in the lineup over Jaden Struble, who's just better now and will be better. He'll be a part of this team moving forward. Like it stinks. And it was a really weird choice by Marty, I think, to put Barron in the starting lineup. He was in the starting lineup. He like that. It wasn't just, he's play on the third pair.
Oh, he's back.
He played on the second pair with Caden Gooley, and he started the game. Like it just seems like you're not putting that player in a position to succeed.
Really actually what you're doing is you're trying to light a fire under him, and he's not what do you call it? He's not answering that call.
No, it's not working. It seems like he knows what he needs to be working on, and just nothing seems to be going right for him. And I will say there were a lot of plays in this game. I think there was a couple at the end of the second period where Barron wasn't getting any help from his teammates. Like they were handing him hand grenades. Like, here you go, just you deal with it now. And I thought he did okay with those, but he could never make a positive play with the pucks he was getting. So it's just sort of, it just doesn't feel like he meshes with this team, which is unfortunate. Moving on, overtime. What was that? What was that?
It was a Troy Terry show.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote in my notes that the Ducks had the puck for 3 minutes, did nothing. Jake Evans got hurt. That is going to be something to monitor. Did not look good. I just wrote upper body. They said it might be a hand. I thought maybe shoulder. Looked bad.
It looked like a hand. It looked like
looks bad.
Like on the bench, when they showed him on the bench, it looked like he was favoring his hand.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. And then right after that, Troy Terry hits the crossbar. The Canadiens go to the shootout. Goals from Laine and Caulfield. I almost don't even want to say saves by Montembeault because McTavish just missed and Terry beat Montembeault through the legs and just missed the net. So perfect ending to that hockey game, honestly.
I feel like Samuel Montembeault earned those bounces.
For sure. The save he made at the end of the third period.
Yes.
They don't even get to that shootout. They don't get to overtime. They don't get to the, wow, Troy Terry hits the crossbar. Montreal Canadiens sure are lucky. They don't get to that if he doesn't make that huge save with, I think, 3 minutes to go in the third period. That was the game right there. Montembeault, like, he stole them a point, and then they ended up getting lucky on the two that Anaheim missed and securing the second point. So completely agreed with you. He earned those bounces.
I think, he played really well, obviously. And that was the thing, too, is that I kept watching the shot totals and the chances. And I was like, this is really making me angry. But then Montembeault was calming me down.
Yeah.
And the thing is, okay, so here's the thing. I think Nick Suzuki didn't have a bad game. I really wanted to talk about that a little bit. It's just overall, the team was just underwhelming. We talk a lot about killer instinct. Like, I don't even think we're there yet. I just want instinct, right? I think the instinct isn't even there.
Yeah, I will say the fourth line came up huge in parts of the second period and the third period. And Josh Anderson, man, he was incredible against the Ducks on Monday night. He was so good.
He just can't score. It was so funny. He was skating circles around them.
The one thing that I want people to watch with Josh Anderson is watch him try to go from his backhand to his forehand. His stick has to move 6 miles to get to the other side of his body. Like he needs like 10 minutes of warm up to just get the puck across. It's the only thing keeping him from scoring goals, I think, at this point. Because if he can make that move and go to his forehand as he's driving the net, he's going to be able to get a shot. But he's just standing there like, I can't get over. I guess I'm going around the back of the net. We see him do that 10 times a game.
Every game. It's so funny. And this is the thing too, is that like it just every single time you just look at it and you go, how fast is that guy?
Yeah, he has not lost a step. He's looked really good. So I wanted to make sure Josh Anderson got his flowers for what was a really effective hockey game from him. All right, we're going to head into our second segment where we continue to also give Patrik Laine his flowers. Another game, another goal. He added an assist and he had the shootout winning goal. So we'll get into Patrik Laine's night in just a minute. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you love sports, you're going to love Prize Picks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the action. Here's what you need to get started today. You can win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. Get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. No need to win. The $50 is guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers fun weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where select players' projections are discounted up to 25%. For example, maybe this week you can look at Patrik Laine to have more than 4 shots on goal, or Nick Suzuki to have more than 1 assist. It's so simple to make my picks and have fun with my friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, we are back in our second segment. Once again, I want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. We really appreciate that. We also really appreciate Patrik Laine. It was a long time coming. We've kind of been talking about that for a while now. But
I feel like we've gone from being locked on Mike Matheson to locked on Patrik Laine in like half a week.
You know the Toy Story meme where he's dropping the toy and he's like, I'm done with you now. That's us with Mike Matheson. And we're just picking up Patrik Laine.
Sorry, Mike.
But the thing is, with Mike Matheson, we were always constantly defending him. So it's not like, the fact that we don't have to defend him, especially I thought he was excellent against the Ducks.
How funny was it too when he was pointing where he hit the
that
puck?
that was my favorite part of the night. So for folks who might not remember, when he cleared the puck on the penalty kill and it hit the rounded glass, but it hit right before the rounded glass and stayed in play. They blew they blew the play down because they thought it hit the rounded glass. Mike Matheson skates up and points to it. He's like, you can see the mark I left on the glass. And they talked about it. They're like, okay, fine, that thing's outside. But it would have killed so much more time off anyway. That was so frustrating. But I loved Mike Matheson just being like, it's right here. The evidence, sir, is right in front of you. That I really appreciated. Laine has just stepped in and ingrained himself in this lineup in a way that I don't think we've seen a player do in a very long time. The last guy I remember doing this was like Tyler Toffoli.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of where my bar is for stepping in and, this guy's a Hab immediately. Like that's the kind of guy that I'm looking at.
So our good friend Mark Dumont of Game Over Montreal, I remember once he talked about Tyler and Kat Toffoli saying they really get what it means to be part of the Montreal Canadiens organization. They moved here and Kat moved from California where all her family was, where her job was, et cetera, et cetera. She really ingrained herself in the city, and Jordan's doing the same thing. Like Jordan is Patrik Laine's fiance. Like these players came in and their spouses literally came in and they said, we're going to be everything that being a Montreal Canadien is like. And, they brought their cause with them. It's called From Us to You, talking about mental health issues and stuff like that. It's definitely something you can check out their social medias. They're really very vocal about it. And I think it's something very admirable. And I talked about this on social media too, just like, an NHL player talking about how he sees a therapist, like that's going to really go a long way. Like you and we don't have a problem with that stigma, right? But in the NHL, in a very, very, very like macho type sport, this is like a huge revelation. I think, years from now, we're going to talk about the effect he had on Montreal when he came in, whatever the players learned from him, whatever the results of this season or next season are. When you look at Patrik Laine, I think that's one of the things that we're really going to remember is what he did while he was here in terms of the mental health, the efforts with respect to mental health, right? And he maybe, like, we're talking about him changing the game when other players are open about this kind of stuff too. And I know we're going to talk a little bit later about Kirby Dach, and maybe he could, he could use some help there. But I think the other thing too is just when he's on the ice, like he seems to be, he talked about wanting to be in a crazy hockey market, but he still seems to be humbled by it, which I think is incredible. Like, he's surprised every time we're excited.
Yeah. Yeah. He, when they gave him that ovation, he essentially said that was outrageous and not deserved. I remember he was also in the locker room and everyone was crowding around him. I think it was the Islander game because they went to overtime. And he said, he pointed at Suzuki. He's like, the overtime winner's right there, right? Like, you can go talk to him. It's just he's very like not. It's funny to say he's not used to it because I imagine Winnipeg was quite like this. But
Yes,
I
especially
I
when
know
he
it's
was there.
yeah, I know it's a completely different breed still to come to Montreal, which is why, like, a lot of people, I know that the common thought when, the rumors were out there over the summer that Montreal might be interested is just, oh, well, can he handle it? Like, after everything that he's been through. And that's what the thing, like, I never understood was we don't know what's going on with him. We don't know what's in his head. Still don't. It's not our business. Never will be. Um, but the
We should
fact that
respect that he knows what he's talking about when he says he wants it.
yeah, and it wouldn't you know it, Laine knows himself better than anybody else does, Like, he stepped in. I mean, I think this is why they probably didn't start him in Boston or New York when they probably could have, because they got to play him the Penguins game on Thursday will be 5 straight games at the Bell Center. He gets to feel that for a good chunk of his start of his season is all home games. December, the first half of December is a lot of home cooking for the Montreal Canadiens. So I think the Canadiens probably could have played him against Boston, and they probably would have lost anyway because that wouldn't have made a difference. But like I think they did this intentionally. They got him looked at the schedule and they saw all these home games coming up. They probably went, if we can get him in there on the power play and he scores some goals, we can put a capstone on this whole, we brought him back. He's back. Yeah. He brought himself back.
Yeah.
Like, we are so back, essentially. That's kind of the vibe around the team right now. Even though they didn't play particularly well against Anaheim, they've won 3 of their last 4.
Yeah.
That win more than you lose is the mantra of this team right now. So, they are doing that.
Right. And the thing too is that, when we're talking about we're so back, anytime he's on the power play or even like, throwing him out there on the shootout, he gives the Canadians an option that did not exist. It simply did not exist.
Yeah.
For all of the things that Slafkovsky can bring, that Nick Suzuki can bring, that Cole Caulfield could bring, which I think the closest thing to Patrik Laine in terms of goal scoring is going to be Cole Caulfield. Like, it's not the same thing as Patrik Laine because he brings with him like an experience. I was going to call it pedigree, but I don't like talking about players like that.
Yeah.
But he gives he brings this like experience, right? Like, he's been there, he's done that. He knows his strengths, he knows his weaknesses. He's not figuring that part of his game out. Like, whatever he was figuring out, it was not how to score goals, right? So I think that was like, that's the big thing too, is that like, he gives them like hope, right? Like, the excitement that you saw on the bench when he was getting ready to shoot, right? Or like the confidence that they now have on that power play wave. I think it shows like in their body language, and he's just so valuable to this team right now. So when you're talking about like we brought him back, like, I think that's so cool. Like, just the idea of it, right? Like, you gave Patrik Laine a second chance. Yeah. You took the flyer, you absorbed that contract, you took the chance when everybody else was saying that's not a good idea, and now he's rewarding the whole team.
Yeah. I look back to that trade, and we loved Jordan Harris. We just knew he wasn't long for this team because of just look at the roster. Like, it's just not working it's not going to work for him here. That doesn't mean it's not going to work for him anywhere. But that trade, Montreal essentially got paid to take Patrik Laine, which I think we're going to look back on years from now and say that was really silly for Columbus to do. Not that they shouldn't have traded him, because I think they both wanted a fresh start, but to sell him, to trade him at a loss, Like it just kind of, it's still baffling to me. Like, yeah, I know he's sort of a distressed asset in the sense that hockey players, when they want out of somewhere, it's kind of difficult to get any value out of them. But boy,
Or
like
even
that,
when they don't want out of somewhere.
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's even harder. You're of course mentioning Jacob Trouba, who he was forcibly removed from the Rangers over the weekend. I did think it was funny, and we'll mention this and then head into our next segment. But I did think it was funny that Igor Shesterkin signed his contract, an 8-year deal with a full no move the entire 8 years.
I knew what he was doing.
I
That man
wonder.
knew what he was doing.
I wonder if that was a no trade up until this weekend, and he was like, "I saw what you did. That's a no move now. By the way, I'm not going to San Jose. You cannot make me." Anyway, that's enough Rangers talk. Although it is kind of interesting looking at that team. I believe they lost again on Monday night, so not going well for the guys in blue. Anyway, we have to head into our third segment where we're going to talk about a guy who had a very Jekyll and Hyde game in Kirby Dach, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. I'll say that again. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we are back. We are rounding up the show here to talk about...
Sorry.
What was that? Go
Before
ahead.
we get into our Kirby Dach segment, I have to issue a correction. I said that Jacob Trouba did not target anybody's head. Turns out he targeted Cole Caulfield's head and missed.
He does that a lot.
I stand corrected.
For every shot
is so short.
For every shot he lands, he misses 4. Like this is the thing with this player. Everyone falls over themselves to talk about like what a great hitter he is. You only look at the hits that he lands, not the ones. Remember the one against Carolina in the playoffs where he put his face Wile E. Coyote style into the glass because the guy went, "Oh, there's a player coming after me. I'm gonna get out of the way." Yeah, I don't know. I can't with this player. Enjoy California,
anyway.
Jacob.
Sorry for interrupting you. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
I had to correct our show. Like we have to.
No, it gave me another opportunity to dunk on Jacob Trouba. I will always take that. So thank you. One player I don't really like dunking on, and I hope I don't have to for a while, is Kirby Dach.
Yeah.
That line played with a little bit more jam in this one. I think all of them were kind of playing a little bit harder. Laine was throwing some big hits. He was getting it on the forecheck and like putting guys into the end boards, which I think like if Laine can do that at this point, just coming back from injury, he's 6'5". Like that is a frame coming at you. And the same thing can be said for his two line mates in Kirby Dach and Juraj Slafkovsky. Dach has been playing heavier.
Yes.
I thought he showed some signs of life in the first period. He drove the net and drew the first penalty of the game that ended up giving the Canadiens the 1-0 lead. I think that he was rewarded with an absolute gift. The Ducks messed up a play behind their own net. Slav was in on the forecheck, made no mistake, and Dach made no mistake as well. But then in the third period, you kind of saw the same stuff from Dach. He turned the puck over at the opposing blue line. He then got called on a hooking penalty on the back check that I thought was incredibly soft. I just thought that was a ref looking for one.
Well, that was my thing, is that if you're going to call that, you have to call like the 10 things that happen immediately after that.
Yeah. And again, so I've said this in the past, and I've been posting about it recently. When you get a power play and you score on it earlier in the game, you don't get another power play the rest of the game. Montreal did. They got it right after that next power play, and then they never got another one. So it was pretty close to, not getting another one. Kirby Dach, though, we're looking at potentially Jake Evans missing some time. I don't know what his injury is. It didn't look good. He looked like he was in a tremendous amount of pain on that overtime shift. If Evans can't go for a while, this just like ratchets up the pressure on Kirby Dach even more, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think one thing that we've constantly been talking about with Kirby Dach is his inconsistency. And he's not doing well out there, but I think something that I've come to learn is not having been through an injury like that. And also most of us as lay people, even if you do have an injury like that, you're not an athlete, right? And if you just think
Yeah.
about how long it actually takes you to come back from that, I think we talked about patience, and I think sometimes we get lost in the frustrations that we have with the team overall, and we're like, and Kirby Dach is not on schedule for his his full recovery. And I think we kind of need to give him a little bit more grace. I feel like the organization is as well, and I do think that Marty is as well, right? I just feel that we may be a little bit too hasty in our expectations, a little bit impatient, I would say, because and I will fully admit that I was one of those people, right? Like I was critiquing Kirby Dach from like game 5, right? So I think that it's possible that it could take a full season for him to get back to 100%. And it's not out of the realm of possibility. And it's also not hopeless. Like just think about all these other players that came before him that had similar surgeries, ACL, MCL, whatever, like all of those devastating season-ending injuries. And then it takes them a while to come back, but eventually they get to a point where they are back. And that's why it's like I'm not giving up hope on Kirby Dach, but I'm also really hoping that the moments that we saw in the game where he did play heavier and he did have that confidence and he did take advantage of the mistake that was made, that we see more of that as opposed to the third period. And again, we're talking about this team has to win more games than they lose. Well, let's say Kirby Dach has to have more positive time on ice than negative.
Yeah, I agree with you to a point. I think, understanding Doc is coming back from a really devastating injury, and I think the thing about it right now is not his knee, it's not his legs, it's his head. I think he's just in his own head right now, and I think it's making a lot of things very difficult. I am worried that we give him this time. Let's say he doesn't have it figured out by the end of the year, right? What do the Canadiens do? Like, you can't, I don't think you can, if he hasn't figured it out by the end of the year, I don't think you can go into next season without another top 6 center, right? Like that's just you're planning for, an outcome that you think is possible. Yeah.
If you fail to plan that, so I think that Kent Hughes will have something up his sleeve. Like I don't think that we're going to bring in an elite, top center. I don't think that's happening. But somebody who can play on the second line for sure. And again, we can't forget that Owen Beck is probably going to end up on the fourth line next season here. There are options for the Canadiens in their bottom 6. And I'm not saying sign Jake Evans to, $6 million and put him on that second line. That's absolutely not what I'm advocating for. But I think that, we haven't even hit the halfway mark of the season. So there's still some time for him to figure it out. If he has like the last 20 games, if he's playing really well, the Canadiens don't really need to think about that backup option. It's only if he fails to figure it out by the end of the season that they have to start worrying about it. And honestly, they're going to have to absorb an unsavory contract for somebody who can play in that second line.
Yeah, most likely. And I think we were kind of in this spot with Juraj Slafkovsky a year ago, weren't we? Right? Like he was demoted. They couldn't find a place for him. Ironically enough, because of the Dach injury, like these two players are kind of like glued together in their struggles to try to find
their fates are intertwined.
Yeah, it's really interesting how like those two, because of the way that they think this team will be structured from the beginning of last season, their progress and development is entirely codependent on one another. It's very interesting that they've kind of glued these two players together. I think I know why, because the concept of rolling them both out on a line and you've got 2 6'4" guys who can, hit you into the boards, but also score on you. That's how you win playoff games. Like I understand.
That is so tantalizing.
Yes. Like the Florida Panthers should be calling the Canadiens every day for 1 or 2 of those players. Like that's the kind of player that would play on that team.
Yeah.
I just think that, I am worried that this is more, I am worried that we get to a point where he does give us a glimpse at the end of this season, kind of like he did at the end of his first season in Montreal, and we go, everything's fine. And it turns out that's the small sample size. That was the part that we shouldn't be betting on. So it's all very fluid right now for Kirby Dach in Montreal. So hoping he figures it out sooner rather than later.
If I'm the Montreal Canadiens, we talked about how Kent Hughes called in Slafkovsky to talk about, his performance. My understanding is he did the same thing with Kirby Dach, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't see it confirmed anywhere.
Yeah,
But
I didn't either. I wouldn't have. I don't think he needs any. That was the talk with Slav was like, wake up.
yeah,
I feel like
I
if you
don't
said
think
that to
Kirby Dach
Kirby
would
Dach
do
right
it.
now, he would fall apart. I think that would
He
be
would
bad.
cry.
Yeah.
Right. No. But I do think like if I'm Kent Hughes, I call him into the office and I go, "This is a sports psychologist. You have to see her or him."
Yeah.
In my head, it's like I'm picturing Law and Order SVU, and the psychologist is always like an attractive woman. So I'm thinking that, or like Ted Lasso, they need what's her face. I
Yeah.
think her name is Dr. Sharon, like her.
Yeah. That is a good place for your mind to go. We need to move on though. We are at the end of our episode, which means we have our trivia. Last episode's question was the first trade in Anaheim Ducks history was between them and the Montreal Canadiens, which involved this Montreal Canadian who won the Stanley Cup in 1993 being traded to the Anaheim Ducks. Jack Eye Face Punch on YouTube. You had it right. It is Todd Ewan. So Todd Ewan, that was the first trade in Ducks history. So very, very well done. In honor of Lane Hutson passing Chris Chelios' point streak as a rookie defenseman, we have a Chris Chelios question for you. Chelios, very fortunately and unfortunately for Lane Hutson, had his first NHL goal on October 13th, 1984 versus Pittsburgh. Who had the assists on that goal? There are some fun names in that score sheet. So who had the assists on Chelios' first National Hockey League goal? Good luck. If you get it, we will shout you out on the episode and pin you in the comments on YouTube. But that's going to do it for us today on this episode of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you so much for listening and making us your first listen. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Remember our giveaway. Send us your Spotify raps with us in that. Make us feel good. That's what we want to see. Leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That would be greatly helpful to us, and it'll enter you in that drawing for the Carey Price picture. You can find the show at Locked On Canadiens just about anywhere, and lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com if you want to send us an email. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you tomorrow.